Trade Genius.
What's going on, guys? Philip at Trade Genius. Apologize for the lack of updates. Just had a lot of things going on lately, but we're going to get back into the groove of things and get you guys Bitcoin videos. All right, so on the assessment of where we are with the markets, my first comment in this video, actually what I want to focus on is, what is Bitcoin going to do? We've had a pretty decent pullback. We look like we were in a parabolic structure, and that seems to have all been thrown out the window on this last pullback. So my first comment on this is, look, we're still basically tied to the stock market, and actually Bitcoin has been a pretty good leading indicator of pullbacks. So like the blue line here is the SPX, and the candles are the Bitcoin price. And what you'll notice is that Bitcoin actually is a decent leading indicator for what you want to look for is these divergences that you get. So you'll notice that price of SPX in this case, a lot more bullish than Bitcoin in a consolidating pattern here. And as we progress forward on the chart, you'll notice Bitcoin making a lower high here. And although we're getting higher lows in the SPX, this is a 15-minute chart. When you start to get that condition, and I keep tabs on this because I think it gives us a good heads up for a decent drop in the price of the S&P 500. Over here, it was at 33.95 approximately, and then Bitcoin still dragging down. You still get this divergence. Another big drop. To me, this would be a big red flag. Start buying some puts at this level, and then what happens is the price of the SPX does indeed start to drop. Boom! A little later in the day, a pretty sharp drop from those levels. You had basically a drop from 33.97 on down to 33.84 and lower down to 33.69. And so those are the things that tells you that these two markets are still pretty correlated, and there's quite a few examples of that. So you had a pretty decent correction that was basically giving you a heads up on by the price of Bitcoin. So these markets are definitely still tied together, and you can play those types of deviations. Just keep an eye on them, and you can simply just overlay. If you hit the compare button, you can compare the symbol SPX USD, and that'll give you this overlay. Okay, so just things to keep in mind when you're trading. If you're trading both of these instruments, here you have another divergence. Bitcoin's pulling down. You can buy some puts here, and you get a move down on the S&P 500. So there's definitely areas to play when you do see that condition happen. Fast forward to what we recently saw. You'll notice too again. Here we go with Bitcoin. Now here Bitcoin rolls over. Okay, and then the S&P 500 up here at the 3550 area tries to make a new high, does make a new high. Bitcoin does start to pull up, and then all of a sudden Bitcoin gets weak again, and then you start seeing the S&P 500 follow through, and then Bitcoin gets really weak here, and S&P 500 catches down to it. So these are big heads ups when you start to see these types of divergences like this. Okay, so just bear that in mind. And these markets are still correlated. Being that these markets are still correlated, you then have to look at the broader market. And what's going on is the Federal Reserve has basically said, look, we're going to reassess the way that we've approached the inflation. And what ultimately, the long story short is they're willing to let the inflation run hotter than they typically have been. They used to have a pretty hard line as far as what was their line in the sand for inflation was, and where they would take action. But they know they can't really reduce rates any further. They're at 0%. The Federal Reserve and the private entities that own shares in the Federal Reserve are not interested in the 0% game. So I think there's a couple scenarios I think that are playing out. One is they want to accumulate assets and do a takeover, which means that anytime there's market turmoil, it gives them leverage to be able to say, hey, we'll come in and save the day, but we got to start buying up equities, right? They've already owned a lot of different types of asset classes on their balance sheet. Equities is really like the last domain that they haven't gotten into. And I would not be surprised if we have some more market turmoil, puts us in a position where they say, look, we got to start rescuing equities outright. It just gives them more power. The other scenario is they go ahead and let inflation overheat. And that seems pretty bizarre in this environment, but they would do that because then they could actually start raising interest rates because look, the central bank, even though a majority of its profits do go back to the Treasury, make no mistake, there's private entities involved in the Federal Reserve, and they are not interested in a 0% interest rate environment. So if they can get inflation to heat up, they can make an excuse to start firing up the interest rate skimming operation that they make so much money off of. And I think that that's probably based on what they've been signaling where we're going. All of that is a perfect storm for Bitcoin, and this is like on a broader macro view for Bitcoin, not the short-term stuff, which we'll cover in subsequent videos, but all very bullish scenarios for Bitcoin. So that's my take on where we are as far as how Bitcoin is reacting in relation to the stock market. The stock market has corrected, and I believe that we'll probably see more downside before we make another run back up, and that will also pull back on Bitcoin. So in the following videos that we're going to push out in the next few days, we're going to talk about levels to look at. So I just wanted to briefly touch base with you guys. I know it's been a while. This is what we're looking at, and how I think things are going to continue to play out in relation to the stock market. I don't think we're going to break away anytime soon right now. Okay, so there you have it, guys. If you want to stay in touch with us more, we can get into the rooms. Here's our current specials running. Would appreciate if you guys check those out. And again, you would be in contact with both myself and Bob every single day and getting updates and things like that. So check it out. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Trade Genius.